I'm Emily Anderson, and I'm a curator at the Japanese American National Museum. I've been doing a lot of research recently using the camp newspapers, and I've been coming across something that I found really interesting. In the Topaz Times, there's a regular column written for women, and in the early months of camp, that column also included recipes of food that people could make in their barracks. So this is food made with very basic ingredients, so at whatever you could actually get from the canteen, and most likely the only way that you could cook would be on a hot plate, or maybe even one of the pot-bellied stoves that people had eventually when it got cold. Today I'm going to demonstrate one of the recipes from that collection. It's a very basic pie recipe. The crust is made with graham crackers and butter. The filling that they call for is just whatever you like. And, you know, because it was the 40s, they suggested various sort of pre-made or instant things. So I'm going to be using a very basic instant pudding mix. And then the final thing, which is the thing that caught my eye the most, was a whipped cream substitute that uses a can of condensed milk. So we'll see if we can actually get that condensed milk to turn into a whipped cream-like substance. So we'll be beginning with the pie crust. So that calls for about 15 to 16 graham crackers that are broken up into crumbs, combined with 4 tablespoons of melted butter. Now, usually when I cook, I would melt my butter in my microwave, but because they wouldn't have had one of those, I've melted the butter on the stovetop in a pan. So we'll be combining those now. So first I'm going to take my graham crackers. And the recipe suggests 15 to 16 graham crackers. So first we have 9 graham crackers. And then we'll add a few more from this pack. Okay, so there we have our 15 graham crackers. So I'm going to just break these up by hand. You just squish them with your hand. You get them into a nice crumbly consistency. Ooh, I can smell graham crackers. I don't know about you guys, but I have not used graham crackers for something in a very long time. And I associate the smell with s'mores. So now I want to go camping and make some s'mores. Okay, I think that's kind of a good, you can see there, it's mostly ground up. So I'm going to now combine with my graham cracker crumbs, the 4 tablespoons of melted butter, and I'm going to mix them with a wooden spoon. I think we need to add another 4 tablespoons of butter because this is far too dry. So let me drop 4 more tablespoons of butter into my pan, and I'll melt that as well. So while we're waiting for that to melt, I wanted to share some of the other recipes that appeared in this column. They're really pretty amazing. So the best named recipe to appear, this came out March 20th, 1943. It's called Rum Tum Ditty. And according to Evelyn Kirimura, who was the author of the column, this recipe was submitted by Mrs. Lauren Bell of 21D. So probably she was an administrator, wife of an administrator or staff person. And Evelyn Kirimura says, Mrs. Lauren Bell of 21D was kind enough to contribute 2 of her recipes to this column. So we resurrected Food Fancies for the occasion. Before the edict fell, did you stock up on some of those cans of tomato soup we glimpsed in the past on the shelves of the canteen? If so, Mrs. Bell offers her recipe for a dish with a lyrical title, Rum Tum Ditty. Pour contents of 1 can of tomato soup into pan. When hot, add 1 pound of grated cheese. Cook until cheese is melted. Add chili pepper and 1 beaten egg. Stir well and serve on crackers or toast. Canned tuna is precious, but for the special occasion when it is deemed appropriate to celebrate, there is another recipe offered by Mr. Bell. Luncheon tuna for 8. 2 cups cooked celery cut in small pieces, 2 cups tuna, 1 package spaghetti, 2 cups milk, 2 tablespoons flour, 2 tablespoons butter, 3/4 tablespoons salt, ½ teaspoon paprika, ½ cup buttered crumbs. And make cream sauce of milk, flour, butter, salt, and paprika. Cook spaghetti, add to sauce, add celery, mix with tuna. Serve with grated cheese and buttered crumbs on top. If possible, bake ½ hour. So these are some of the incredible recipes that were appearing in the Food Fancies column by Evelyn Kirimura. Okay, so now my additional 4 tablespoons of butter are ready. I'm going to pour that in. This is starting to come together. So I'm going to now transfer this butter and graham cracker crumb mixture into my pie tin and just start pressing it in and shaping it. Huh, interesting. So it seems like either they have really gigantic pie tins in Topaz, or I would recommend using less than 15 graham crackers. Maybe their graham crackers were smaller in 1943. You learn all sorts of things when you test out historic recipes. Okay, so now I'm going to get the water started for our condensed milk experiment. Now, while the hot water is boiling, I'm going to bring out the pudding mix and put it in. And then I'm going to read you some more recipes. So I'm going to take some chocolate pudding mix that I pre-made. And this is just, I got this at Sprouts. You know, it's the Sprouts equivalent of the Jell-O chocolate pudding mix. I've already mixed it with milk and it's ready to go. So this will go Just gonna spread that out. Fill the crust with our Jello, we're going to fill the crust with the pudding mix like that. So it's not the prettiest pie I've ever made, but again, when you're incarcerated behind barbed wire, I'm sure any kind of pie seemed pretty good. So now we're almost set. But we got to wait for the hot water to boil. So I'm going to read you some more recipes because I love these. Now let me first read you actually the recipe that we're working on right now. So the pie recipe that I'm working on right now appeared on February 6, 1943. So let's see. Food Fancies by Evelyn Kirimura. It takes quite a bit of persuasion to obtain some of these recipes, so treasure them highly, kitchenette cooks. Going to have company tonight? How about serving them delicious pie? It's possible, you know. Baking a pie without an oven is one of the miracles of Topaz. Amy Kajiwara of 98E contributes the recipe. So for the graham cracker crust, we have 15 to 16 graham crackers, crushed or rolled crumbs. And I didn't use this because I know that sugar was a highly rationed item, so I imagined sugar would be the hardest to get here, so I just didn't include this. But optional, 4 tablespoons sugar, and then 4 tablespoons butter or substitute melted. So I tried 4 tablespoons and it just didn't seem like enough. I ended up using 8 tablespoons, but it calls for 4 tablespoons. Add melted butter to cracker crumbs. Blend thoroughly. Press into pie tin firmly with the back of the spoon. Pie filling. Use any prepared pudding, such as caramel, etc. Any variety of pies can be made with lemon, pumpkin, etc., using honey in place of sugar. And then the whipped cream, which is what we're about to attempt next. If you wish to add that extra touch, Martha Nozawa of 115F suggests whipped cream topping. 1 can condensed milk will not work with evaporated milk. Drop can in boiling water unopened. Boil vigorously for 5 minutes. Chill immediately outside window until thoroughly cool. Overnight is fine. Now, I have one prepared to go, and it's in the fridge because in Southern California in June, putting a can of condensed milk outside is not going to cool it down very much. So mine is in the fridge to kind of replicate the conditions of February in central Utah, where it would have been really cold and the outside would have been a good enough fridge. Now, after it's been cooled thoroughly, you open it up, pour into bowl, whip with rotary beater, adding sweetenings such as sugar or syrup a little by little after it starts to thicken. So we'll see if that works. So one of the things that I found really interesting when I was going through this column of recipes, I was sort of anticipating some Japanese food classics because that's what I would want to eat myself. But actually what you get mostly in these recipes are sort of standard 1940s food from, you know, sort of a Betty Crocker or Better Homes and Gardens cookbook, which doesn't really appeal to me, but you know, it's interesting to think about how a lot of young Nisei women, or even I guess Issei women, may have been making things like this. Also, probably these ingredients are a lot easier to get at the canteen than the things that you would need to make more traditional Japanese food. Although eventually it looks like, based on my research, that a lot of the camps had farms and grew vegetables, including a lot of traditional Japanese vegetables. But early on, this is still early 1943, those vegetables wouldn't have been available yet. So the food that is recommended through this food column is all very sort of basic 1940s American food. Here's the next one. So this one is from February 27, 1943. Evelyn writes, first ingredients necessary for any recipe, according to the boys, are apple polish to be liberally sprinkled on the block manager and also a few extra fuses, both to be used at the opportune moment. I don't know what that means. With this injunction, we present recipes and suggestions of our Topaz experts. Mrs. R.A. Bankson of 23D offers a recipe for her son's favorite dish, tuna vegetable casserole. Into a skillet, dice a button of garlic and fry it in 2 or 3 tablespoons of salad oil. When the garlic is brown, remove it from the oil and throw it away. Make a gravy with 2 tablespoons of flour and as much milk as necessary to make a thick sauce. Grate a half cupful of cheese and dissolve in sauce. Use more cheese if a richer sauce is desired. Drain the juice from a can of peas and from a can of tomatoes. Mix these with a can of tuna. If you have access to an oven, big if, mix peas, tomatoes, and tuna in a buttered casserole and stir the sauce into it. Cover with grated cheese and bake for half an hour. If you have no oven, cook the mixture in a pan on top of the stove for 15 or 20 minutes. Serve on toast, 6 servings. So that doesn't sound very exciting to me, but maybe it was then. Okay, we're going to turn now to our condensed milk with cream concoction experiment. So I'm going to start with some tongs so that we can drop in the can, and I've peeled the wrapping off of the can. So this is just, Eagle brand condensed milk, standard can. So I'm going to take this and drop it into my big pot of boiling water. So here's my can of condensed milk. I'm going to place it carefully into my pot of boiling water. And the water level is all the way to the top so that the can can be completely immersed. This will stay in here for 5 minutes. The language that Evelyn uses is to boil vigorously for 5 minutes. So this should be at a very good rolling boil, and the can should stay there for 5 minutes. So now we're going to remove our can. And since I am not living in central Utah in February, rather than putting it outside to cool, I will put that in the fridge to cool. And the instructions say that overnight is fine. So we're going to see now if this condensed milk experiment will work. So I'm going to open up my can and pour that in there. The condensed milk just looks like condensed milk. So I'm a little skeptical, but we'll see if this will turn into a whipped cream-like concoction. And for the interest, I'm a historian, so I like to do things as historically accurately as possible. So I have procured a old-fashioned rotary beater for this part of this recipe. Okay, so we're going to whip this. Well, this is still pretty liquid. So maybe I missed something. Maybe it needs to be frozen instead of just refrigerated, because it is true in central Utah in February, that's going to be below freezing temperatures. So I may have needed to put this in the freezer rather than the refrigerator overnight, but that's how we learn. So I'm going to assemble my pie. So here we have our pie, and I'm going to take this rather liquidy condensed milk to top it off. Then let's see if we can. Oh. So there we have a piece, sort of our pie. Let's see how this tastes. Actually, it's not bad. I thought the condensed milk would be too sweet, but since I didn't add sugar to the graham cracker crust, that's still pretty bitter. The sweetness from the condensed milk and the graham cracker crust seem to go well together. And also the chocolate pudding isn't too sweet. So it has a decent mouthfeel. Flavors actually not bad at all, especially thinking about being at Topaz eating this. It might actually be pretty good. So the condensed milk experiment didn't work out, but they probably need to do some tweaks before I figure out exactly how to get it to whip up like whipped cream. But I was actually able to make a Topaz version of a chocolate pudding pie. Thank you for joining me today. This is part of Tadaima, the virtual pilgrimage. Please join us next week and the following weeks as we keep bringing content like this to you so that we can celebrate pilgrimages and remember and honor those who were incarcerated during World War II, even while we're all staying at home. Thank you. I don't know what's supposed to happen, but whatever that is, it doesn't seem to be happening.
Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight, Sunday, for our Sunday Supper edition. This is the start of week 7, if you can believe that. It's been amazing. There's been 6 full weeks of programming, and this is just the start of week 7. So I want to thank you all for coming. First off, I want to just say thank you to Kimiko Mar and Hanako Wakatsuki. Kimiko Mar runs Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages, and Hanako is from the Minidoka National Historic Site, where she is the Director of Education and Interpretation. And they are the 2 people that really spearheaded this with a lot of other representatives from the other pilgrimage sites, but really those 2 really carry the weight of the pilgrimage. Also have to thank Mia Russell, who's from the Friends of Minidoka, and for allowing us to be part of your Sunday Supper. I don't know if I hear a little ring, but this is really great. And so we've been enjoying watching other people's Sunday Supper, so we're grateful that you're coming to ours today. Before we start our program, just wanted to let you guys know there was a prompt asking you guys to pick a protein that you would least like to eat. So I think in the chats it said someone's taking it for the team, so that's me. I'm taking it and my son will be taking it for the team. And the winner was dried beef. At the end, it started to get close. Bologna and Vienna sauce started to creep up there, but never got close. And I'll show you a sample of the dried beef once we start getting into the conversation. So with that, I want to introduce Emily Anderson, who needs no introduction, but she is a curator at the Japanese American National Museum. And as she had reminded me earlier today, we have known each other for more than 20 years.
21 years.
Emily's only like 30, so I don't know. I didn't realize I knew her when she was 10. But, she started at the museum answering phones. She has since gotten a Ph.D. She has taught at Washington State University. Mm-hmm. She has worked at the Museum of Man, and currently she has returned to the museum again to curate exhibitions, which she had done before. And I will say one thing about her experience, which is similar to mine, is that we have been there for so long that we had the opportunity to work with some incredible curators like Akemi Kikamura Yano, Karen Ishizuka, Karen Higa, mm-hmm. All incredible mentors of both of ours, but probably more so Emily, because I do a lot of art stuff, but Emily does a lot of curation stuff. So with that, what we're going to do is talk about, or Emily, is there anything you want to add to the introduction?
Well, also Clement Hanami, art director, vice president of, what is your full title, Clement?
Exhibitions. I do exhibitions.
and who also keeps the museum running. Without Clement, there would be no museum. Yeah.
There would be. Yes,
so whatever. But I've learned an incredible deal also from Clement. So you are also one of my mentors, even though I give you a hard time.
Okay.
Don't
so with
quote
that, so yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about, so, you know, it's interesting. You are currently curating Youth in Camp, as well as Bible and Sutra. Can you talk a little bit about both of those exhibitions and how Youth in Camp actually led you into finding some of these things about food in camp?
I would love to. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And so yes, how did Youth in Camp lead to Food from Topaz? So we are at the museum currently on the research and development phase of 2 different exhibits, both that were funded very generously by the MPS JAX grants. One is an exhibit that explores the experience of youth. So think sort of younger, say younger teenagers, so 13 to 16-ish age kids, not the older say who are able to sort of, you know, resettle earliest, but the ones who stayed and their families tended to stay in camp until the end. What were the experiences of these kids like who were becoming teenagers, adolescents, experiencing puberty as they were incarcerated? And there were a lot of them. As we all know, 2/3 of those incarcerated were American citizens. Of that number, a little under half were minors. So there were quite a lot of kids of this age, right? So we're exploring what the experiences were like. And a large group of those kids were involved in things like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, but there is a wide range of activities. And the other exhibit we're working on that we're doing with Duncan Williams of USC's Shinzo Ito Center for Japanese Religion and Culture explores religious experiences in the camp. So we're primarily focusing on Buddhism and Christianity, but just sort of the spiritual and religious experiences of people who are undergoing incredible trauma and difficulty, and how they really relied on spiritual practices and beliefs as they attempted to sort of make sense of this experience that they were undergoing. Now, as part of that, my role as a curator is to do research. And I'm also a historian, and historians often end up doing very tedious research because you have to basically go through a lot of boring stuff to find the gems. And so one of the things I've been doing, what I've been describing it as endless, like 1942 to 1945 Groundhog Days. I've been going through camp newspapers, all of them. I'm on Camp 7 right now, got 3 more camps to go. It's taking me forever, but I am very committed to doing this because I found things like an entire recipe column that appeared in the Topaz Times in the first few months of 1943. It didn't last for a very long time, but there are about 5 or 6, and I shared some of what I consider some of the, you know, the funnier, more interesting recipes in that clip you saw. But I discovered that just as an accident. And I think those of us who have talked to people who were incarcerated, you know, certainly Clement and I have been talking to lots of folks over the last 20 years. The impression I always had was that food in camp was awful. And I think that's sort of the common story that we hear, right? We hear about latrines, the mess halls, the food was terrible. But as I've been going through the camp newspapers, I've been discovering all kinds of really interesting information about food production in the camps. So that's how, even though I was doing research on like Boy Scout troops in the camps, I have become obsessed with food information. So that's why, even though I'm doing research on like teenagers in the camps, I'm sharing food stuff today.
So can you talk a little bit about some of those discoveries? And because I agree, so many people have felt like, oh, the food was awful, I can't eat any of this stuff. But it was amazing what they were able to accomplish.
So my understanding, and you know, there are some scholars who've done a little bit of research on sort of environmental history of the camps who have done a little bit more systematic research on this. But my understanding is that there was a real mandate from the WRA for each of the camps, the 10 WRA camps, to be self-sufficient. Part of that, I think, was they wanted to give the impression that they were not
coddling, you know, because there's this fear that people outside of the camps would view the WRA as treating the Japanese Americans too well. And so they didn't want to spend too much for the food budget, and which was a real problem because they had a budget and were spending a lot less than they could have in order to prevent the impression that they were coddling those who were incarcerated. So, and also a lot of the Issei were farmers, and they were good farmers. So you can imagine these people sitting around thinking, I can make better food, I can grow much better vegetables. And what I've heard anecdotally is that originally the vegetables were often pickled. They had not very many fresh vegetables. And so in the first year, they worked on sort of preparing the land, procuring seeds, and then also it wasn't just vegetables and fruits. They also had full poultry farms, hog farms. Some actually had beef cattle, and dedicated enormous human and material resources to make the camps self-sufficient. And the thing that I've become so fascinated with wasn't just those things. Tofu. Every single one of the camps that I've looked at so far, so there's 3 more that I need to get to, but so far, every single one produced tofu in the camps because soybeans were available. They, were able to procure soybeans, and depending on the camp, they either transformed an existing building or built a building specifically for tofu fabrication. And we're churning out between 600 and 800 cakes of tofu per week, which I think in one camp was enough to furnish all the mess halls with tofu twice a week. So it wasn't daily, but there was, that's quite a lot of tofu, right? And of course, with soybeans, you can also make miso. So there are other places that, one of them was producing like 60 large buckets of miso every other week. So they could have like miso soup once a week from the miso. And in the case of Manzanar, they actually brewed soy sauce because soybeans are the basis of all those good things. So I had no idea that was a thing, but all of them, and each tofu factory was headed up by an Issei who had been making tofu as, a business before the war. So they were really making use of existing skills and existing expertise to make sure that people, it wasn't perfect, but the food quality seemed to improve over time. But then, go ahead.
It's amazing. It's how like Koji Laozawa and a lot of the other Bonnie Parker, a lot of the other archaeologists, or Bonnie Clark, the people that are working in digging and looking up they've been finding that there were sake stills and all these other things that the very entrepreneurial Issei and some of the elder Nisei were making.
Apparently there was bootlegging, which there's a dissertation that I haven't read yet that's on sake production in the camps, which was illegal. They were meant to be dry camps, but apparently they had that. And also there was like illicit gambling and stuff going on to go along with the sake. So there was a lot of interesting stuff that isn't reported in the papers. You can find some of these in the police reports. Okay, can I share my favorite?
But that's another exhibition. So your favorite. While you're sharing your favorite, I'm just going to check on the cook. Okay. So.
Okay. While that's happening, so the article I came across that got me sort of freakishly obsessed with looking for food information in the camps was an article from the Gila News Courier, so Gila River, the camp in Arizona. And this is from March 30th, 43. And the headline says, Ika, 10 cents a pound. So Ika is squid, right? So I was like, why are they talking about Ika in the middle of Arizona? So I'm just going to read you the whole article because this is incredible. So it says, Ika, 10 cents a pound. While the old favorite squid may not be that cheap nowadays, still, for a nominal sum, one can purchase all he wants of the slimy but delicious mollusk. Other seafood sold or will be sold in the near future at the Block 6 Ironing Room at Canal and Block 42 at Butte include sea bass, bonito, pike, mackerel, stinky, sardines, oysters, shrimps, and sundry others. Prices are subject to change at every sale. A part of the community enterprises, the fish market will open once a week at Canal and Butte, usually on Thursday and Fridays, respectively. And I just thought, like, so many questions, right? Where is this stuff coming from? Who authorized it? Also, where are people cooking this stuff? Are they like grilling squid on their potbelly stoves in their barracks room or on a hot plate? Then everything is going to stink of fish. But you also want, like, were they setting up hibachi outside and creating like fire hazards? So if anybody knows anything about any of the fish markets, please tell me. Because the other thing is that it wasn't just Gila. Manzanar had one, Tule Lake had one, Minidoka. Heart Mountain had one. Let me read you what Topaz had available at their fish market. So Topaz had their fish market, which was was set up in one of the laundries. They had booty with bone, sashimi, shrimps large size, shrimps medium size, oysters half pint, suzuko kasuzuke, and suzuko shiozuke. Again, my dad's from Utah. I've been to Utah. We went to Topaz, Clement. Like, how does anything get to central Utah? There is nothing there. There has never been, there have been Utes and Paiutes and, like, white people have not been there. There's, like, no where is this coming from? I want to know so badly. Another thing you'd be happy to know is that people pickled stuff. So there was, like, takuan made from daikon. You might be wondering, how did they get daikon? Well, they got seeds because I think that there were people who have been selling seeds before the war. I heard from somebody that Mr. Hachimonji, who is our very beloved former volunteer Ike Hachimonji, his dad, who was a seed salesman, his dad, as a seed salesman, was given special permission to go back to El Monte, California, to get some of his stock so that they could grow gobo, daikon, shira uri, like all kinds of Japanese vegetables, so that people would have the things they were used to eating. Yeah, so please, anybody who knows anything, tell me, because I am dying to know. But, like, Heart Mountain, they had fish in Heart Mountain. How does that get, it's again, not freshwater fish. This is not the stuff they're fishing it from the rivers. This is ocean fish. Poston did have a fish pond that they populated with, like, carp and things like that, but this other stuff. Tell me, somebody.
So this is one of the things we're hoping that we can do tonight, that anybody who's watching, if you know any elders, any nisei, or anyone else, even an older sansei who has any stories, any evidence of any of these things, we'd love to see them. There's a question from Wasabi 510. I think that is Patricia Wakita, because she's from the 510.
Hi, Patricia.
I'm hoping it's Patricia.
It has to be.
She's asking, have you seen the joke recipe for tempura mosquitoes in Arkansas? And at the same time,
I missed it.
Had any good, funny, any good jokes that you found about cooking in camp?
No. I've been looking for food stuff and then also news of illicit activities. So that I don't know. I'm sorry, this is totally a tangent, but I have to share because I think people find this fascinating. There was a poison pen letter writer who got caught in Topaz, like was writing mean letters, and they caught her and she was like fined, but not a food thing. So sorry, Patricia, I haven't seen that. I'll have to go back through. Oh no, I have to go back through the Arkansas camps for the 4th time.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be in Arkansas. So anyway, we can probably message Patricia directly. So there's another question. Do you know if there's any history or evidence that spam musubi could have been invented during incarceration?
Spam, because the proliferation of spam is more related to U.S. military. So that's why there was a lot of spam in Hawaii, so wherever the U.S. military has gone. So Okinawa, like, spam is also very popular, Guam. So it's more connected to U.S. military deployments throughout the Pacific. and I don't know when Spam was first made, but I do know that there's a direct link between U.S. military deployments and Spam availability.
Okay. There's another question from S. Colin. If you have any knowledge of how they would pickle those veggies.
So they pickle them the way you pickle anything, right? So they would take daikon and cut it up and put it in a pickling liquid. And so they're pickling, an industrial level of pickles. So enough to have at each mess hall for, at least a meal. I don't think it was for every meal. That was a little bit beyond their capacity, but pretty often. Yeah, they didn't specify, because they do talk about like which things are being made, but they didn't specify what the pickling liquid was composed of. But the other thing that I found really interesting was that in Gila, they were selling frozen food at the canteen. So, the canteen was like the store on, like the little like food, like the shopping mart at camp. So in Gila, they had some of the most popular meals are beef stew, macaroni, and meatballs, brown gravy, and chicken giblets as frozen dinners. Again, but that's all there was. So I don't know who was making this. Where are they getting the like material to make these meals? How many people are buying them? Where are they heating them up? Like, is this again on a pot-bellied stove? It's a very strange thing.
Uh-oh, there's our chef still cooking away. She has 10 minutes.
Stop putting pressure on Christina. Wait, sorry. I have another little factoid to share, which I thought was hilarious. So in Topaz, so for some of these places, it took them a while to get up to speed with tofu production. So it seemed like they would hear that another camp was producing tofu, and then they'd be like, because in one it was like, apparently Manzanar and Jerome have been producing tofu for quite a while now. So they were clearly like, what? They're getting tofu? Why not us? So in Topaz, when they were getting ready, I'm sorry, this just cracks me up. So they're trying to figure out how to set up the equipment. So it says equipment for this process, that is creating tofu, will either be made here or sent in from the coast. Plans call for the use of steam from hospital generators. But if this should prove to be unfeasible, methods for setting up the cooking equipment will be developed by the Public Works Department. Steam from the hotel or the hospital that just sounds unhygienic to me. I don't want my tofu steamed by like steam coming from the hospital. And I don't think they ended up doing that. They like set up a whole like separate building. But yeah, that's just so many like fascinating little tidbits, and all like they're just these little mentions, and it's like just skimming the surface, and there's so much that it doesn't tell us, and so much about how important, especially like I grew up in Japan. For me, the thing I miss the most, the thing I eat the most when I go home and have my mom cook for me is fish. Like, samma. I want nice mackerel. That's what I crave. And so to be Japanese, especially to come from coastal areas where they had access to fish markets and fish, and then like on top of all the other indignities, like the inability to eat the things that were of home that gave you comfort. So the importance of tofu and miso and fish must have been enormous. But I want to know more about all of these things. And I think of all the people that we all have known who we've lost, who could have told us some of these things. Like all the questions we thought we had asked all the questions, and there's still so many that we don't have the answers to, or we're just discovering new questions to ask them. So if you're, Bachan or Jichan or like auntie, uncle, or, or even somebody like remembers hearing from somebody, please share with us. We'd love to hear stories about food.
Well, in the chat, there is a Gail Hoshiyama who says her dad was a butcher in Delhi for Topaz. So
Cool.
she's put her email in there. So that's really
Okay.
good. She also mentions Jane Beckwith.
Okay.
Jane
Yes.
gave us a great tour of the whole museum and everything when we were there. It was an amazing place. So thank you. This is exactly why we're doing this, because we're looking for connections. I know at the museum we do have a whole slew of paperwork of like menus and how they had to calculate the different amounts of potatoes they needed and fish and whatever to be able to feed the people in the mess halls. And so we do have a lot of stuff, but it's always great to have first person perspectives and stories. I also think that we've interviewed Glenn Ishikawa's father, who was a cook in camp as well. And it was interesting that a lot of the Issei or Kibes were cooks, because when they were here in America, that was what they were doing as work, was to cook. So the camps would pull those people from restaurants and stuff to obviously staff the kitchens.
Well, one of the other stories I've heard that I think is so funny is that, certain cooks in certain mess halls would develop a reputation for being especially good because they were former professional chefs or former, professional cooks. So they actually knew what they were doing. And so then for a while, like everybody would be going to those mess halls and avoiding the others. And then the WRA administration would be like, we don't everything's split evenly. You can't do that. You have to stay with your block's mess hall. Stop going to Ichiro, whatever his name's mess hall. I know he cooks better, but that's, them's the breaks. But
June Burke talks about stories like that where they would just, as young kids, they would roam around to all the different mess halls and just eat wherever, like you said, but they couldn't stop the young kids.
Right. And again, so I know we're talking about food today, but I thought this is also a great opportunity because really I am still doing research for a youth and camp exhibit, is that, so in addition to Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, like the social groups, and I just have to share some names, by the way, because some of these groups have the most incredible names. I also have a list of Nisei nicknames if anybody wants those, but stick with these. So in Jerome, we had groups named Bronco Babes, the Royal Coronets, the Cardinals, the Jovial Peppers, I think that's my all-time favorite name, the Trigams, the Vanguarditas, and the Wampus Babes. Also, let's see, there was also a Wampus Babe, oh God. There was also Wampus Babes in Gila, Blisterbugs, Saltpeters, the Dukes, and also they had an aeronautical club. So another of my, as you can tell, I obsess about certain specific things I find. One of the things that I found actually incredibly profound and poetic is that there are a lot of model airplane clubs in all the camps. And I think they tended to skew a little bit older. It wasn't so much the younger kids, but I'm still so interested in these model airplane clubs because they seemed very pretty intense. People took their stuff very seriously. Oh God, that dry beef looks disgusting. And they would have competitions where they'd fly their model airplanes against each other. So anybody who knows of people who were a member of these model airplane clubs while they were in camp, or even if they're not around anymore, if you remember stories about model airplane camps, I would love, or model airplane clubs, I would love to find out more. So some of the other clubs, horseshoes seem to be very popular in camp, which I associate with like summer camp, but apparently they had them in concentration camps too. Weightlifting, boxing, judo, shogi, and then different kinds of like nihonbuyo, different kinds of Japanese dance. And also marbles. There are a lot of like younger boys, like under 10, who had marble competitions. So, if you know of anybody who was really involved in any of these kinds of youth groups, please reach out to us and let us know. We would love to also hear about that. At Janm, we like to hear about any of your experiences, but these ones in particular. How's the food coming along, Clement?
It's very interesting. So Kristen had a question in the chat, like, are we using traditional recipes from camp? No, we're not. We're not that evil to the chef. So, but what we wanted to do was just illustrate a point about how, you know, some of the materials were not always the best in the beginning, in the early part of camp, just sort of stuck with what they had and what they could get from the PX. But with that, you know, like with Emily's recipe for the pie, you just kind of made do with what you had. And so with that protein that was sort of, you know, picked by our audience, she is charged with cooking something that we are going to sample very soon.
Christina's really taking one for the team.
Who's going to eat it?
But she's had to figure out how to cook it. That's really
well, she didn't know what it was. Yeah, so chopped.
It is really chopped. It's like, what is this thing? Put these three things together.
Okay. So Emily, how can people get in contact with you? And you sort of talked about what you're looking for, right? What you want from people to.
So I mean, for the purposes of this program, what I'm really interested in is sort of two general categories, right? So youth in camp. So if you know stories or know of artifacts or photos that relate to sort of, you know, early teenagers doing the roving bands of teenagers that we've all heard about. What were they up to? What were they doing? I would love to hear more about those. So that's one category. And then the second category is stories about food. What, you know, because food is it's for survival, but it's so important to our emotional well-being and health and happiness. So what are the stories around food, both the disappointments about food in camp, but also the ways that people really manage to cope and improvise and come up with ways to have at least a little taste of what was familiar in home. So you can reach me at the museum at EANDERSON. So E and then my last name, ANDERSON at Janm, JANM.org. So, and you can also reach Clement Hanami at chanami@janm.org. Please, you know, I would love to hear your stories, and hopefully we'll be able to share those things through our programs at the museum. Oh my goodness, Jonas.
Okay.
Hi, Jonas.
So just briefly, what do you call this?
Well, it's like a beef roll with vegetable inside.
So this is a beef roll. Might look familiar to some of you. Okay, Jonas, take a bite. Oh, it came apart. You're supposed to grab the whole thing. Okay, beef roll.
I just like green beans.
The beans are grown in our own yard, so that's good. Jonas, get up. What are you doing? How was it? Okay, the second one is for Dakota. Look. What do you call this, Dakota? It's in the chat. SOS.
SOS, yeah.
What does SOS stand for? What does SOS stand for, Emily?
I don't know.
The first word is an expletive, and it's on a shingle.
Oh, right.
So this is for Bob Origami, if he's watching.
I hope he is. If you are, hi, Bob.
I think I lost my taste tester.
Jonas has no stick-to-itiveness. How's that?
Well, definitely Hawaiian bread makes it good because King's Hawaiian bread just makes everything good.
King's Hawaiian to the rescue.
It's very, what's the gravy made with?
Milk.
Just milk and
like a roux flour.
And a roux flour. Okay, so there's some definite technique. Christina went to the Cordon Bleu in Pasadena.
Yeah, Christina is a professional, unlike some of the rest of us.
Yeah, unlike me. She's the real professional.
Or me.
And then this is the fried rice.
Wow, so Christina, you did 3 courses?
Well, that was a challenge
Wow.
to cook dry beef 3 ways. So,
Wow.
right? Actually, the dry beef actually tastes pretty good in fried rice. It's not bad.
It's
It has
very
a-
salty.
It's very salty,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
I think as Japanese Americans, we like that. We like the rice and then the saltiness of the food to kind of bring it
Mhm.
together. Actually, I think these are very good, Christina. I think they're very good.
Oh, Christina, you're amazing.
I don't think the 8-year-old agrees though.
No, he-
But
No. Thank you for hanging out with us, Jonas. We appreciate it.
okay. So, anyway, back to Emily. So, is there anything else that we need to sort of? I mean, I think it's really important that youth in camp was an interesting topic because we know that the people who are surviving right now were actually children in camp.
Right.
And so it's been very interesting when we talk to them. I think in virtual pilgrimage, we talked to a lot of them as well. A lot of them were always kind of like, oh, it wasn't so bad. I was a kid. And so we had a lot of friends and life was, our parents made our lives better.
Mm-hmm.
They protected us. But at the same time, I think a lot of them are coming to realization of sort of how this experience has affected them. And so I think Emily's work is very relevant now because of these children who were really looking at their lives when they were children. So again, we're encouraging all of you to contact either Emily or myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they put my email. I'll put my email in the chat right now too.
Okay, we put mine in.
Yeah.
And I think, as I've thought about sort of the ways that stories about incarceration have been shared over the years, I think, the older Nisei, who are also the World War II veteran generation, they were the ones who were the elders of the community, like when I first started this work 20 years ago. And the younger ones, they were like all the people I've talked to, at least all the men, they're all Korean War vets. Like they were too young to serve in World War II, but they all served in the Korean War. These are the people who, camp was, they're always like, they don't want to say it, but also like if your parents kind of protect you from the realities, like you're in roving bands of teenagers, like there's kind of a part of this that is fun. But when they were forced, when they left camp, and were trying to sort of reestablish their lives, these kids had to go to high school, from 1945 on, often in places with still very virulent anti-Japanese racism. I know I've talked to folks who didn't have a single friend in the high school they went to and ate lunch alone every day for 3 years, and or people who lived separated from their parents because everybody was, living in different places for work and for a room. So it's a generation that I think we haven't, and not intentionally, but we haven't shown a light on as much. But we really, and I'm sorry to say that we've lost some of those folks already. I mean, some of these people are well into their 90s because Nisei are with us for, luckily for such a long time. But we want to make sure that we really think about what their experiences were like as well, because it's a very different one from the older Nisei experience. And if I may make, so that's our plug. Please share stories of youth in camp and also food stories from camp. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to turn the food stuff into something else eventually at the museum.
No, I mean, well said. I think, and I think a lot of people that are with virtual pilgrimage echo that sentiment. I know like Dakota and Hanako and Kimiko, all the people that work with the different pilgrimages see it. They'll have a pilgrimage 1 year and then 2 years later, people are missing already. And so we see it every day. So I'm not trying to be very dark or grim, but time is
it's just
fleeting.
the reality. And I think, I think about this, how we get sort of in a way, like I get so used to, I honestly, I've gotten to the point where like 90 is not old because I know so many people who are over 90. But also 90 is like, it's crazy to expect people to live that long. You know, they do.
Who did you interview in Utah? The veteran?
Judge Uno?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was he's a
Judge
good example of that.
Yeah, but he's not even the oldest, because I think he's barely still in his 80s, but he's still in his 80s. You know, like Takeshi
Only in his 80s.
Well, that's the thing. Like, to me, somebody in their 80s is still a spring chicken, because we've interviewed 2 94-year-olds for this project. And so I think I've gotten lulled into just sort of expecting people's life expectancies to be kind of crazy, but they're not. So, you know, it's a reality of the work that we do, that the people who actually experienced it are, you know, we need to capture those stories now, and it's really important that we do. So, and even people have been interviewed before, we can interview them again, you know, like there's never too many times. Yes.
So really, thank you. And this is a call to action for all the people who are watching and people who have family that are elder. And I know it's very hard because of COVID-19. It's incredibly hard for us. I was personally traveling an exhibition called Contested Histories across the United States, where we've been trying to capture stories by putting artifacts in front of these people that we're talking about. But because of the pandemic, we had to shut it down completely. So since our last venue was the Smithsonian on February Day of Remembrance.
Day of Remembrance.
So, and March came, and it's in crates sitting in Maryland. And we're kind of sort of in a lull because we don't know if we should ship it back or just wait until hopefully it lives. I don't know. But the point being, time is of the essence. And so for the viewers, if you guys can connect us, even through Zoom, we'd love to talk to people. Yesterday they had Minto Nai. I'm sure everyone loved that. You know, he's a good example, like, you know, a spring chicken, 91 years old, I think.
Oh my God. And he's got the sharpest memory. It's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody, I want you to know that if you don't like listening to your grandparents' stories, like, I love listening to grandparents' stories. Like, I will come virtually into your house and listen to grandpa or grandma tell stories for you, it'll be the 100th time. For me, it's the first time. And I actually absolutely love hearing these stories. So I will be your like replacement grandchild for the day, happily. And, you know, if we can figure out technology, we will do that, because, you know, we know that just because we're all kind of stuck at home doesn't mean that life is also moving on at the same time. So we need to sort of be also flexible and figure out how to keep collecting the stories and keep, you know, like recording people, because that's really important to us.
Okay. Are there any last things, Emily?
I don't think so. I think, you know, I mean, yes and no. I could keep talking forever, but I'm not going to.
So, but my favorite part of this whole thing was Emily Anderson spelling out her name. That's the story of my life, having to spell my name. But E. Anderson, come on, everybody knows how to spell Anderson.
Some people think it's E-N or O-N. It took me until 2nd grade to learn how to spell my own last name because it was long.
Okay. You can tell we have a lot of fun with each other. So I want to thank you, everybody, for participating in virtual pilgrimage. Yeah, know that this is still going on for 3 more weeks. 3.5 more weeks.
Three.
And there are so many great programs that are still coming up, and definitely the closing will be a big splash. So please keep tuning in and share this with all your friends. Like the video on the pilgrimage site, and subscribe if you can. So with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you, Emily. You're awesome.
Thank you, Clement.
Okay. See you guys. Thank you all for coming in. Bye.